Hello, my name is Ryan, and this is going to be my oral presentation for Freshman Writing Seminar. Um, I have chosen to write and present on the topic of standardized testing in schools, notably high schools in America, although I do have a little bit of other research outside of that main margin. It's important to me because I have grown up through the public school system, and I have been subject to countless standardized tests every year. There's always been a multitude of tests for different subjects. My peers, my siblings, and I have all had to take standardized testing, and it is something that I'd like to put my 2 cents in on. That's why I chose this topic. It's something that I'm familiar with. I can finally get to share my opinion on, and something that I feel like I can talk about well. Um, the rhetorical question that I've chosen for this topic is, do we really want to have our children standardized, if you will? Do we want to have them regurgitating the same information that they've learned in class? Do we want them to just be memorizing facts and gaming the tests for points? Or do we want them to be creative, express themselves, and form unique, individualized solutions to problems? Personally, I think that is the correct answer. It's not to standardize these things, it's to allow students to have their own uh, creative responses. Standardized testing actually has a very lengthy and detailed backstory, dating back almost a full 200 years since the actual first conceptualized idea of a standardized test being applied to a classroom full of students on one set of subjects as we would recognize it today. Um, an interesting factoid is that College Board, or the earlier iteration of it, the College Entrance Examination Board, was founded in 1900, so they've been around for well over 100 years administering all sorts of tests, and they are the ones that are in charge of the big name tests like the SAT, the AP tests, all of the specialized tests that everybody has to do well on in order to progress. My personal connection to standardized testing is that as a student, I have had lots of opportunities to take all sorts of tests. At every level in my school career, I've had to take tests for various teachers, the district, state, all the way up through the ACT and SAT, even just to get into college. I have lots of experience with this, and I would consider myself to be rather knowledgeable as an insider, as somebody who's been subject to all these tests. Among all of the research that I did for this paper, I was able to find lots of different authors and articles that align with my point of view for it, which is that standardized testing is harmful. Two main paths that the general consensus kind of divides down along are that A, standardized testing is biased and is biased towards wealthy or more fortunate students who have access to better test materials. That I found in an article by Alfie Kahn and is reiterated on in the Monti and Medina article. And the other main kind of way of thinking here is that standardized testing generates standardized answers and kind of crushes the creativity of students. That line of thinking was mainly in the Bronwyn Williams article that we read in class and is also reiterated in the Monti and Medina article as well. Theirs has kind of both sides to it. For my interview for this project and essay, I chose to go talk to my philosophy professor, Jesus Aguilar. I figured he would be a good person to interview for this because he's in the humanities, he's teaching a philosophy course, and he administers tests for his class, and that's the only graded material that he gives. The class is entirely based around these 5 tests. So I asked him whether or not RIT offers him pre-written material in order to test his students on, and he said no. And even if they did, he wouldn't use it because philosophy, at its very core, is about thinking and about finding your own answer to a problem. And having pre-written single correct answer tests really kind of defeats the purpose of teaching a philosophy course. He wants He writes his tests is with a couple questions about the ideals of philosophers, and then he has open-ended responses for students to fill in their interpretation and application of those ideas. This structure is really important to him in the course because it doesn't force students to find that one right answer. Sure, there are a couple, yes or no things that you kind of need to understand, but with philosophy, as with many other things, the true importance is in figuring out how you want to answer it, and not being forced into picking that one right answer. As with any argument, there is another side to this. Mainly that standardized testing helps hold schools and teachers accountable for delivering a proper education to their students. Um, Dylan William talks a lot about this in his article, that it is very important that there be a method in place to track how well students are doing. Standardized testing has been, is, and probably will continue to be this main method because it allows you to see whether or not they're learning the material. It allows you to categorize certain things and really track how everything is going, and make sure that students are getting the information that they need to be successful. The problem with this is that the method in which this is being done is, well, standardized. The unfortunate problem of scale is that standardization is really the most effective way to reach students because you can write one test and have everybody take it. Problem with that is not everybody's the same. Everybody's going to have slightly different ways of coming at problems. Everybody's going to think about things a little bit differently. Everybody's going to have different experiences they can apply to solve problems. So the standardized tests that everybody takes are going to come across a little bit different for everybody. And forcing all of these students to take the exact same test is really forcing them all to try and think the same way, which is really unrealistic. Every student's a little bit different, and standardized tests are not trying to encourage this uniqueness and creativity. They are only trying to determine whether or not you have memorized a few certain things. Throughout this process, I have not changed my opinion or position. As a student, I've always had that, standardized testing sucks, why do I have to go take this test, blah, 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 it's a waste of time. But now that I've actually sat down and found genuine reasons why standardized testing can be harmful, it's only really reaffirmed my belief that something really should be done to change the implementation of this. I get why we have to take these tests and why people insist that they're necessary, but there have got to be better ways to do this. My influences coming into this, my existing beliefs have been, my previous experiences and the brief snippets that I've read. But I have discovered and learned a little bit about the other side as well. There are a handful of really good reasons for standardized testing, and I see why this is the system that we've ended up with after all this time. People have been working on building this for hundreds of years, literally, and a lot of people truly believe that this is the best system that can be in place. But there does have to be some sort of compromise. This type of testing, is only growing. Students are taking more and more tests every year, and it's just too much for students. Too much memorization and regurgitation of specific information that you have to know, says somebody somewhere, that may or may not really pertain to you, may not be in your interests, may not be something that you find easy to learn about or remember. And this is stuff that really determines how well you can do. These tests determine how you get into college, how you do in school. These are the main methods of tracking how well you're doing as a student. And these stakes are too high to trust as something that is something that's different for everybody, but somebody says that it should be the same for everybody, which doesn't make sense. For the future, at least the immediate future, nothing much is going to change. That is my prediction. Standardized testing is, and will continue to be the main uh, method of assessment. Nobody has the time or effort or budget these days to design any form of assessment that is going to vary from student to student, at least on the scale that we're talking about. Even in a district or a state or the nation, it's just too many kids. I get that. But I think other research that could be done would be to ask students what they think. I know there are random surveys and things out there, but I think that during testing in the future, if companies like College Board were to sit down and collect information on what the students thought would be a good method of testing, there might be some good ideas out there from the student's perspective that would be fair ways to vary tests from student to student, or at least more than just one version of a test. To have some more open-ended answers, to have more opportunities for students to express themselves and their interests, to be able to determine, to be able to more accurately gauge how each student as an individual is doing, rather than as aggregate data. As far as drawing any conclusions, it's that something does need to change eventually. We can't keep going like this. There's too many students that as far as conclusions that I can draw, just reiterate that I don't think that we can really keep going like this for very longer. I think that something will eventually have to change, and hopefully that can be with student input, and teachers and companies and students can all work together to find something that works for as many people as possible and allows everybody to be successful in their own way and keep track of that in a way that makes sense.